Hello everyone, and welcome to The Good Old Gamer, the channel where we cut through the marketing BS and look at today's latest and greatest gaming technology and old technologies that make the most sense for you. So, alrighty, this week is a big week. We finally have the benchmark numbers for the RDNA 2-based Radeon 6800 and 6800 XT. Now, a lot of you guys out there are really upset with this launch from AMD. And honestly, I don't really know why, except for perhaps the stock levels not being where we all hoped it would be. So today, that's what I want to talk about. What's going on? Why are you guys so upset about this? I woke up Wednesday morning to my Discord basically just blowing up over this launch. So that's what I want to talk to you guys about here today. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts, my opinions on what I've seen. I think that this is a good launch from AMD. It's not as strong as I had hoped, but we already knew all of that going into the reviews. We knew this after the reveal. They weren't going to have a DLSS competitor, and they weren't really tackling any of the AI stuff that Nvidia offers. So Nvidia does have an advantage, but AMD also has a major advantage. So that's what we're going to be talking about here today. If you guys like these kind of videos, please smash that like button. It really helps me out. YouTube really did not promote the last video very well, and I want to thank all of you guys. We did okay because you guys commented and smashed that like button. So please continue to do that. Otherwise, YouTube will continue to bury content like this. All right, so starting off, I'm going to jump over here on TechSpot with Steve Walton's review of the 6800 XT. This is the first place that I went Wednesday morning when I saw everybody freaking out. I'm like, okay, maybe they screwed something up. But going through the numbers, I typically just go to the overall results. I'm not too worried about individual results. Now, I found it a little ironic to see a 1080p 18 game average, but it was in there, so might as well check it out. So we have 197 and 151. Coming in on top is the RX 6800 XT. So this is beating out even the RTX 3090. So, okay, that's a good start. That's literally the first benchmark that I saw, and I'm like, wow, that's really impressive. At 1440p, we're looking a little bit ahead of the 3080 and a little bit behind the 3090. Not as good, but still a very, very solid showing for a $650 graphics card. Now here's the big one, 4K. This is obviously going to be a 4K gaming card, and now it kind of made some sense why people would be like, oh, maybe this isn't as good as we had hoped, because it actually seems to lose by a little bit, not much. Realistically, the 1% low is the only number of real relevance. Average doesn't matter, and we'll talk about that in a future video. So basically 79 to 81. So pretty much a tie there, but it is losing to the 3080, and that's not so good, and the 3090 is comfortably ahead by 10 FPS. Jumping down to the 4K cost per frame, even though it was slower, it still ekes out the RTX 3080 because it's $50 cheaper. So even though it might be a hair slower, it is a hair cheaper, so it basically washes out there. So that's still good. Now, here's the other one, the ray tracing performance. Now, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, this is a 2018 game and one of the first quote-unquote ray tracing games that ever was. So horribly unoptimized would be my thought, and this is good. This is like a worst case scenario. So taking a look at this, we can see basically the same numbers as the 2080 Ti with the 3080 comfortably ahead. So in worst case scenario, the 6800 XT on older ray tracing titles basically beats out the 2080 Ti, but does lose to Ampere. Now moving on over to Dirt 5, we can see that the 6800 XT actually beats the 3080. So best case scenario, this is obviously an optimized title for AMD. It's one of their launch titles. So best case scenario, it's faster in ray tracing than the 3080. And worst case scenario, it is about on par with the 2080 Ti. To me, that's pretty fair. So better than the 3080 and also worse, all at the same time there. Now, this is where things got interesting because I assumed that they were using the Smart Access Memory, or SAM. However, scrolling back up, I noticed they were using a 3950X for this test system instead of the 5950X or 5900. So I was like, so all of those benchmarks were without Smart Access Memory enabled. Okay, so that to me means the numbers that we saw were actually like worst case scenario for the 6800 XT, and it's still basically on par with the 3080 and even beats the 3090 in 1080p. So that's really impressive. All right, so going back down to the SAM results that Steve has, we can see here a massive increase in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Now, a lot of you guys might be like, well, this is one benchmark. Yes, but this is also one of the biggest games of this holiday season, so this is important. All right, so we see a massive jump from the standard 6800 XT results on 1080p. Not really a big deal. It's 4K where things really matter. And as we can see here, essentially without SAM, the 3080 and the 6800 XT were tied. However, with Smart Access memory, the 6800 XT now has a comfortable lead over the 3080 in 4K. Moving on over to Rainbow Six Siege, we can see at 1080p not as big of a difference, and at 4K it doesn't make too much of the gap, but we can see here that the 6800 XT was behind the 3080, and now it's basically on par with it with Smart Access memory. So what that says to me is this 18 game average at 4K with Smart Access memory would mean that the 6800 XT would at least match the 3080, if not possibly beat it out. And then at 1440p, likely match the 3090, if not possibly beat it out. And then if you're crazy and at 1080p you wanted to run these things, it would mean that the 6800 XT with Smart Access memory will be leagues ahead of any other Nvidia graphics card. So those were the numbers that I was looking at, and I'm like, okay, so worst case scenario, it's basically a 3080 level, and best case scenario, it's actually better than the 3090, which is what I talked about in the last video. Under certain conditions, looks like this thing will be faster than the 3090. Now remember, this is without overclocking. And with manual overclocking and tuning on top of the Smart Access memory, it might be substantially faster than the 3090, coming in at only $650. So my takeaway from this is that's a hell of a lot of horsepower at a pretty reasonable price. So to me, I don't really understand where all of the negative sentiment to this launch comes from, outside of the fact that availability wasn't very good. However, AMD will be launching third-party models in just a few days from now. And there's reports out there that perhaps that's where a large portion of their stock went. We don't have any numbers on that, but we know 1 week later after launch, these cards will be replenished. There will be a new supply of them, obviously, when these AIB cards come out. How many will there be? Nobody can say. But a week after the 3080 launched, there were still no cards. Nvidia took a while to get more supply out there. It took almost a month before I started seeing the resupplies really kicking in any measurable way. This is going to take AMD 1 week, and then there's going to be resupply. So supply issues, we'll see how AMD handles that. I'd say let's give them at least a month or two, because Nvidia's had a few months and they still haven't sorted it out. If they can do it in a faster time than Nvidia, I would say that's a win. So at this point in time, to me, the stock level thing, it's kind of a non-issue because we can't accurately describe it. There just hasn't been enough time for them to sort it out. Let's put it that way. So outside of that, I don't know what else you guys were really expecting here. I know a lot of reviewers, for example, Linus, he really focused on that Shadow of the Tomb Raider ray tracing benchmark, so he wasn't very impressed with the ray tracing. However, if he looked at Dirt 5, like Steve did, basically an optimized title and an unoptimized title, it paints a clearer picture of the situation. Also, moving forward, how many games are not going to be optimized for AMD hardware? 0. All of them will be optimized for AMD because of the new consoles that have come out. Obviously, Shadow of the Tomb Raider is not optimized for Series X and PS5. It was optimized specifically for RTX. So that is literally the worst case scenario. Moving forward, I would expect more on the level of Dirt 5, maybe a little bit lower. So from what I'm gathering, at least as good as what the 3080 offers in ray tracing performance. Now, I know a lot of you guys out there, you don't really care about ray tracing. I don't either. It's a feature that I don't think that's really going to matter until maybe the end of this generation, when they can figure out how to make it less or more cost effective to use it, less heavy on the GPU, which always happens every generation. Features come through and they figure out tricks to make it work better. So 4 or 5 years from now, ray tracing might actually matter. It's not that big of a deal here today, and most games are just going to offer very nice visuals without ray tracing anyway. So to me, that's not that big of a deal. The real crux of the problem here is the lack of comparable features between AMD and Nvidia. Now, I've talked about this a lot on this channel, and that's because this is important. Nvidia has made their GPUs more of a workstation type graphics card, even the GeForce stuff. They don't have workstation drivers, but CUDA is supported by a lot of stuff out there. A lot of programs that most of us use for work. I use a lot of stuff that uses CUDA just to run this channel, and so do a lot of other people out there. Now, for those people, the AI stuff for creators, if you are a content creator, that is going to be a huge selling point for Nvidia. So that's going to drag a lot of people in. And then there's also the DLSS. Now, I know a lot of you guys, you don't want to hear it. You think it's a gimmick. It's not a gimmick. It's literally the future. AI upscaling is going to be on all games in the future at some point. Is it going to be DLSS? Unlikely. It'll probably be the Microsoft DirectML version that they make for the Xbox and Windows. And that'll eventually come out, and I'm sure there will eventually be an open source version that will probably be used in like Vulkan, and maybe that'll become the standard. But AI upscaling is a big deal. I recently got my hands on an RTX 2060, and this is a card that cost $350, then got knocked down to $300. And nowadays it's back up closer to $350, which is crazy. But this is not a high-end card, never was. It's not super powerful. It's basically like a GTX 1080 level performance. But with this card using DLSS, I'm able to game at 4K on my LG OLED using DLSS in today's biggest games. It works great in Watch Dogs Legions and Call of Duty Cold War. Works fantastic in those games. And soon I'll be using it on Cyberpunk 2077 to run 4K on a $300 graphics card. That is the power of DLSS. So 3 of this holiday's biggest titles support this. This is a feature that does matter, and the fact that AMD is not competing with that I agree with Linus. He kind of hit them pretty hard on that as well in his video, and rightfully so. But here's the takeaway. AMD decided to go after the performance and performance crown. Like I said, the 6800 XT, first off, that's not their top tier card, but it's still in the realm of the 3090 in certain areas. And like I said, with Sam and stuff, it might be even closer with Steve's numbers. I can't wait for him to go ahead and do updated numbers with that. Also, with more updated games that utilize RDNA 2, it might also take over the 3090 just because of optimization. That's very likely to happen as well. So a $650 card, basically on par with a $1,500 card, offering 6 more gigabytes of memory than a card that's $50 more than it. To me, you can't argue with this. They won on performance. Now they have to focus on features. So to me, AMD did a good job with this launch, other than the supply. I'm going to give AMD a few more weeks, see where they're at, and if they don't have it sorted out or somewhat sorted out by then, well, guess what? I'll do a video on it at that point. But for right now, I want to see how next week's launch goes, and if it comes out okay, they're doing fine. So at this point in time, if you're not a creator, and I actually did a poll, I actually asked you guys, how many of you actually do live streaming? Because a lot of you guys were upset about the encoder quality and that kind of stuff as well. And according to that, only about 7% of you guys, I haven't checked it this morning, but as of last night, it was 7% of you actually live stream regularly. So you're the super enthusiast group. That means maybe half or 1/3 of that is, the majority of people. So what, 3% of the population? That's a big deal. It's not a feature that matters to most people. So AMD seemed to focus on the things that mattered to the widest audience, the most amount of people, which is performance overall. And I think they nailed it. So now they just need to focus in on features, feature parity, and then I think they'll be okay. But I want to hear your thoughts on this. Do you still think that this is a bad launch other than the supply issues? I don't really want to hear about that because, like I said, it's not done yet. We don't know anything yet. So anybody making snap decisions on that, that's a bad call. So let's wait on that one. But are you upset with the ray tracing performance? It's better than a 3080 to 2080 Ti-ish levels. Like I said, optimized versus unoptimized. Do you not think that they're going to become more optimized in the future? Do you even really care about ray tracing? Most people I know, they don't. Unless it has like no performance hit and it looks better. That's the only time anybody's going to care. But realistically, I don't think that we're going to see big ray tracing games like Minecraft RTX will be like the showpiece. But big path trace games like that are still way too far out. And until we have that, I don't think it really matters personally. But I want to hear your thoughts on that. But yeah, so why are you guys all upset? If you're not upset, if you think it's a good launch, just, smash that like button on the channel. Let's show AMD that they did a good job. They finally, like I said, to me, they've taken the performance crown at $650, and they still have another card to go. And I think they have one even beyond the 6900 XT, like some liquid-cooled version with crazy power consumption that will just decimate everything. So I still think that they have room to go one more step beyond, but I don't see the 6900 XT losing overall to any of these cards. So to me, like I said, besides DLSS and the Nvidia features for creators and CUDA and stuff, if you don't need any of that, AMD is really the way to go, assuming you can get one of these things here in the future. So, alrighty guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. If you like this video, once again, smash that like button. It tells YouTube we're doing well here. You guys enjoy the content. And then that means more videos more frequently because YouTube will then promote them better. And it's kind of just a cycle there. So I really appreciate all you guys helping out there. But that's all I really have for you here today. And I will catch you guys in the next video.